Twister is by far my favorite skill of all time in PoE, so there should come as no surprise as I'm covering it this league as well. But this time, we're taking advantage of some incredible tech, making the build broken as fuck as well. It one-taps all the bosses in the game. It's incredibly fast and tanky, and it has such fantastic clearing capability that it stops time and space. Or well, lags out the server at least. And in this one, we'll cover everything you need to get this beauty of a build online. I'll also cover how you can build a few different versions of the build depending on what content you mainly play. As you may have noticed, I used a few different skills in the clips, and of course what you'll do if you're on a budget, because the gear I'm using is definitely not budget gear currently, but there are ways to make the build on a budget. Alright, first things first, let's start right off with the techs making the build beyond broken. And I want to give a big shout out to my lovely friend Bashowers for coming up with a lot of the interactions and helping me out in building this. I'll link his build version in the description. Alright, so first we're going to stack spell damage in this build because we're actually going to deal hybrid damage. In our cock, we have arc. Since we're playing Oracle, we have 100% crit chance, allowing the cock to trigger crazy amounts of times when paired with twisters, synergizing nicely. But it's also a projectile. So when we're stacking projectile ranks, we're benefiting for both skills. This is far from enough though. So for them to deal even more damage, we're stacking spell damage, as this can too double dip, boosting both our twisters and arc, as long as we have Crown of the Eyes. And I'm saying arc, but you can play any spell skill you'd like. Comet, for example, is fantastic at single target, and Frostbolt is great at nuking your PC. Alright, and where does the spell damage come from then? Well, partially from the passive tree, but perhaps the biggest amount comes from the threaded light focus. Using this, we gain 15% spell damage per 10 spirit. And I'm currently sitting at over 400 spirit, meaning more than 600% spell damage for both my arc and twisters, basically solving most of the increased damage bucket by itself. But there is also one additional important passive node, in particular, that is just fucking insane, and that is Mystical Rage. I have this on my Megalomaniac, but you can also just anoint it. And the reason it's so great is because we are already rage stacking, so we gain 100% spell damage from it right away. But it also benefits from Berserk, allowing us to gain 200% damage from this node itself. And of course, by spirit stacking, we are able to use a bunch of magnificent persistent buffs for extra damage and clear. Alright, next tech we're using is a simple weapon swap. If you've played Twisters before, you know how this works. We have one weapon set for full attack speed stacking, allowing us to become fast as fuck. Then we have set two with a bunch of damage, and since Twister snapshots, it'll gain all the damage buffs from this set. The main difference now from a regular Twister setup is that when you're doing tough content, you're staying in set 2 for longer. That is not weapon swap instantly, as you want to stay in set 2 for your cock arcs to deal maximum amounts of damage. And for one final sneaky tech, since we're rage stacking and using Berserk, we can combine this with freezing enemies for Baitair's Vengeance for 100% gain as extra cold damage. You can either do this by having it in spear throw and throw it out every now and then, or Twister for it to happen automatically. And for doing Arbiter farming in particular, I typically use this in combination with Siny Equo to freeze the boss before nuking him, so he doesn't run away and do all of his annoying fucking mechanics. Alright friends, those are some of the main and most important techs to make the build work. Let's check out the gems and gear now, shall we? But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, Everwind, a sandbox survival game with a new take on the genre. It's a new adventurous RPG where you and your friends, assuming you have any, work together to build your base, gather resources, craft, and fight off enemies and bosses. They recently dropped a demo to critical acclaim and want to show some improvements they've made since then. The world generator has been improved, now including a bunch of varying biomes and worlds to discover like jungles and islands. There's substantial changes to combat, including new bosses, dungeons, and challenges that you'll reach via your ship. They've also added more spells, parrying, and third person, making the combat more fun and interactive. Also, more build variety and gearing options. And with this, they've added entire NPC villages, working and iterating on NPC AI to make them interactive. Me personally, I've been incredibly excited for this game since they announced it. They're not quite ready for early access yet, but you can wishlist the game on Steam and follow their progress using my link in the description. Now, when it comes to the gems, we first have Spear Throw. Here we just stack up a bunch of cold damage and freeze build-up so we can freeze quickly and gain the Bater's bonus. Or if you're lazy, you just ignore this skill completely and slot it into twisters instead, which is what I usually do when not farming Arbiter. For Whirling Slash, all we care about is speed. So the only important thing here is that you grab a level that you can sustain with your mana regen itself, so you don't run out of mana when traversing. Basically, use as high of a level as you can sustain, or just grab a low one if you can't be bothered to test for yourself. We then have Rage 3, for some extra rage and attack speed. Rapid attacks, for even more attack speed. Rigwold's Ferocity, you want the attack speed here, so make sure to set it to Weapons Set 1. And if you can't afford this gem, just grab something else. You'll find options for the expensive gems in the planner. Knockback, and this one's massive, so you can push enemies away, and Innovate, as you sometimes manage to kill enemies with the skill, and when you do, you want some damage for your troubles. Next is the Twister skill. Make sure this is set only to Weapons Set 2. What you need to know about this skill is that it eats ground effects and your Whirling Slash whirlwinds to deal extra damage. Also, more skill effect duration equals big damn equals big dick, because the longer your twisters stay up, the more hits it will be able to dish out over time. For the gems, we have Armor Break 3 first. We're using this to gain endurance charges. Then, we transform these endurance charges to frenzy charges via resonance. This allows us to always have maximum number of frenzy charges when mapping, which in turn allows us to maximize the barrage repeats. We're also going to combine it with charge regulation, and with some extra interactions, we'll have all charges up for all of these buffs. We have Garukan's Resolve for damage, Salvo, which is the most important gem, allowing us to gain a bunch of extra projectiles, Rage Forged for even more damage, and Retreat 3 for, yep, even more. Then we have Charge Regulation, of course, for crit chance, energy shield, and attack speed, followed by our Barrage. The rotation is going to be Spin to Win, Pop Barrage, and Twisters, and Repeat. To boost it, we use Cooldown Recovery, heightened charges to sometimes double the number of repeats, perpetual charge for more uses, efficiency for less cost, and rapid casting for more cast speed. Next, we have my favorite combo of all time, cast on crit and siphon elements with Arc and Sione's Temper. Since we're going to get disgusting amounts of crits, we can use double Arc for when we overcharge the cock. Arc then have this interesting mechanic where it chains, and it chains more if you have lightning infusions, along with granting it 200% more damage. Yes, that's right, a 3x multiplier. To spawn these lightning infusions, we're going to rock siphon elements, gaining infusions as we shock, which we'll do constantly. Then, we use Sione's Temper to get even more arcs, and also cast them in a circle around us. Finally, we boost them via Rakiatas and Boundless Energy for more casts and damage. Now, you don't have to play this if you don't want. For running Arbiter, I usually slot in Comet and Living Bomb instead, as it deals better single-target damage when you can't make enough elemental infusions. I'm also a big fan of using Frostbolt, as I mentioned earlier, as it's a great skill to nuke your graphics card with. For siphon elements, I then use Remnant Potency and Harmonic Remnants. I don't know how the Potency one is supposed to help me, but picking them up easier is nice. After that, we want Eternal Rage to stay at maximum rage. If you're on a budget, you'd use it only in weapon set 1. If you've got currency to spend, and in turn also a buttload of spirit, then why the hell not use it in both? And speaking of spirit, I have Mysticism 2 and Cannibalism here, only because I had spare spirit. If you don't, then just throw them in the trash along with my hopes and dreams. To boost the rage, I'm using Diala's Desire and Uhtred's Omen. No worries if you can't afford these though. It's only 9% rage effect for me. I do, however, want to mention that I'm only using a rank 14 Eternal Rage and Berserk. This is to keep the strength requirement down. Got more rage? Then grab a higher level. Next up is Sniper's Mark. I use this when doing any kind of pinnacle boss farming, partially to gain an extra frenzy charge, but perhaps more importantly, Charged Mark can create Shocked Ground, which our whirling slash eats and boosts our twister damage. It's also a great way to create ground effects if you're having issues freezing for Frost Nexus, or don't want to use a Headhunter, for example. For extra support gems, I'm rocking Rapid Casting, Prolonged Duration, which is shit, but I've got nothing else to shove in there. That's what she said. Charge Profusions for more charges, and Eternal Mark for an extra mark. Now, if you don't care about pinnacle boss farming, then I'm a massive fan of using Cast on Elemental Ailment and combining it with Detonate Dead, which deals millions of damage in the temple when enemies have a buttload of health, and Firewall to boost all projectiles and the usual support skills. Next, we have Herald of Thunder for extra damage and Spawning Chilled Ground via Frost Nexus. We boost the freeze build-up via Freeze, Embitter, Cold Attunement, and Elemental Armament. You can also replace this with Elemental Conflux if you want, especially if you only run high-juice temples. And then finally, Trinity for a big chunk of extra damage. If you don't have enough spirit for it, then Elemental Conflux is a great option as well. Alright, so that's the gems. Now, I've already gone through this, but I'm 100% going to get this question, so may as well timestamp it for all the idiots that skipped the earlier parts. Is that you? Yeah. Firstly, fuck you, and secondly, this is what you do if you don't have all the spirit gear I'm going to show soon. First, charge regulation, cock and siphon elements all need to be in both weapon slots. Then, you remove mysticism and cannibalism from Eternal Rage, and you also make sure that Eternal Rage is only in weapon set 1 if you're lacking spirit. Then, you set Berserk only to set 2, because that's where we need it. Herald of Thunder should be on both weapon sets, and you can also ditch it completely as we already have great AoE. Finally, Trinity should be in both weapon sets, or you can ditch it and grab Elemental Conflux instead. This, along with following the gear, should set you up nicely. And speaking of gear, here it is. The most important part is grabbing a Crown of Eyes, and you need a Spirit Corruption. 30 Spirit is expensive, but 28 or 29 is not, and you can also just corrupt a bunch yourself. Next, you're going to get Spirit on your amulet, and +3 to projectile skills for both arc and twister damage. I'm also anointing Infusion of Power to gain power charges, which will be transformed into endurance charges and grant me energy shield via charge regulation. The final stats are not important. Just go for as much defense as possible and fill out with item rarity unless you're playing with a rarity bot. For your chest, we also want Spirit, followed by grabbing as much energy shield and resistances as possible. I'm playing Chaos, Reese, and Max Life, but you can go with Chaos Inoculation if you want, making the gearing easier. Just make sure you have life regen somewhere in that case, as Berserk will kill you otherwise. The next important part is the rings. You need unset rings, as we want as many skills as possible to spend our spirit on. It's imperative that you get a life and mana leech roll as well. Other than that, though, it doesn't fucking matter. If you want damage, go with flat damage rolls. If you want rarity, go with rarity, etc. Just make sure they're unset rings and have leech on one of them, and you're fine. For the boots, go for as much energy shield as possible. You can ditch the movement speed, as you're traversing with whirling slash anyways. For belt, go for either headhunter with 1 or 2 resist corrupts, or use soul tether. I use soul tether when playing with a rarity bot, as I can then use Sin Equo for more damage and crowd control. But if you're using headhunter, you want to get Essentia Sanguis for energy shield leech. And make sure you corrupt or buy a corrupted pair with extra frenzy charges. It should be cheap. Finally, we have the weapons. For set 1, you only give a shit about attack speed. For set 2, however, you want as much damage as possible. Physical damage preferably. Then you should prio the projectile skill ranks, especially if you're using arc and crit chance. This one's basically the perfect weapon and costs a shit ton. But just do your best to grab any half-decent weapon and you should be fine. If it's shit, you still have your cock dealing a gazillion damage as long as you pair it with threaded light and spirit stacking. And also, spirit efficiency is a good way of helping you solve the spirit requirements if you're having issues, as it's just an easy desecrate. Before heading off to the passive tree, let's quickly take a look at the flasks and charms. The reason I'm not using Chaos Inoculation is mainly because I can use Olroths for a big chunk of extra defense. I then have Lavianga's Mana Flask to make Whirling Slash spammable, along with Valiko's Roar, which will trigger easily via a passive node that I'll show later on. I also have for Utopia for stun protection and Rite of Passage for extra speed. If you're on a budget though, then you're going to slot in Breath of the Mountains, as we can use it to gain power charges consistently. And the reason this, and Valiko's, will gain us charges consistently is because of Catalysis in the passive tree, which will transform some physical damage taken into cold and lightning damage, allowing the charms to trigger. Great job, friends! Gear complete. Let's head over to the passive tree now, and after that, I'll teach you how to play this magnificent build. First, you want to be an oracle, of course, as we're getting access to inevitable critical for a bunch of extra damage and cocks. We then take the unseen path, because it's the only useful one, and pair it with entwined realities. After that, we head down, grab as much attack damage and spell damage as possible, along with this lovely rage cluster for a buttload of damage. Here, I also have my Megalomaniac with mystical rage. And as I said earlier, if you can't afford it, you just anoint that shit, because we can solve getting power charges with our charms instead of infusion of power. It's not as reliable, but it's good enough. After that, we go to grab some extra spirit, damage, skill effect duration, energy shield, and extra frenzy charges. Next, we head onwards and start grabbing as many grand spectrum jewels as we can for more spirit. If you can't afford them, then you grab just regular old damage jewels. Keep moving down here, grab the energy shield, some shock magnitude, and the Archon buff. This is another reason as to why you want to stay in set 2 after casting Twisters, because if you weapon swap, you lose this buff. Up here is how I solve ailment threshold, that is, by grabbing jewels with them to save some passive points. The same goes for this jewel here. After that, we head downwards to grab a fuck ton of attack speed, along with this massive crit cluster, along with the resonance keystone. We're getting all the charges, but frenzy are the most important as we'll keep spending them, and this allows the consistently generated endurance charges to transform into frenzy charges and sustain us. Down here is also my most important item, and against the darkness jewel with both spirit and gain as extra cold. You're likely shit at the game and can't afford it, so start by looking for one with just spirit. And if you can't afford that either, then you grab any half-decent damage rolls. Either way, it's a great location to use it, as we can grab all of these nodes. Next, we grab some AoE before heading down to grab more crit. And the real reason we go down here, attack speed. Because we want to be fast as fuck, boy. And finally, catalysis to generate charges and some extra attack speed. And with that, we're done with this shit. Let's head into a map and I'll show you a bunch of dummies how to play the build. Fortunate for you, it's easy and silky smooth. You simply use your whirling slash for traversing. Make sure you keep up the whirlwind buff, pop your barrage and twisters. Keep repeating this combo and you'll clear out the map in no time. When it comes to bossing, basically any boss except Arbiter gets one shot. Here you want to include Sniper's Mark though. You first make sure your rage is full and spam at least 3 whirling slashes. Then, throw out a Sniper's Mark onto the target, barrage, and use your twister button. Doing this, pretty much any boss should be dead. The only annoying one is Arbiter. I fucking hate this guy since they gave the bosses damage reduction early in the fight. I have great gear, so I can usually just one-shot the fucker. But you likely don't. So to offset this, you can just spam your spear throw on him until he's frozen, as the Sign Aquo gloves makes it way easier to freeze and stun. When he's frozen, not only can he not move, but you're also getting the 100% gain as cold damage buff, allowing you to kill him with ease. Simple as that. Or you just kill him like normal, but chances are you may need to do some mechanics, and who the hell wants to do that? And now, my friends, we're finally done. Drop a sub. Make sure you wishlist Everwind, because this game could become an absolute banger. And I'll see you in the next one.